Hello, my name's Alan Renwick. I'm from University College London. I've worked with citizens' assemblies all around the country, and I've been asked to say just a few words about how we approach listening to evidence. You're going to be hearing a lot of evidence over the course of the assembly, and it's useful just to think about how to go about doing that. So I'm going to talk about three things. Firstly, I'll say a little bit about the types of evidence that you'll be hearing. Then secondly, I'll talk about how to think about what the speakers are saying. And then thirdly, I'll talk about how to think about how we ourselves listen to those speakers. So firstly, on types of evidence, I think you'll be hearing two broad kinds of evidence over the coming weekends. You'll hear evidence from each other, and you'll also hear evidence from witnesses. So the evidence from each other is just fantastic. You'll have great conversations with people you've never had conversations with before about all sorts of things, and you'll learn so much about people from very different walks of life, very different kinds of experience. And I know from the work that I've done with citizens' assemblies just how valuable that is to participants. So that's really great. Of course, it's important to remember that you're not experts. You're not speaking with experts when you're speaking with members of the assembly. You're here as members of the public. That's why you're so important. But that's really, really valuable evidence. And then second, you'll be hearing from witnesses, people who come in and address the assembly. And there'll be various different kinds of witnesses. There'll be, for example, scientists who've done research on the issues and come up with detailed findings. There will be advocates who argue for particular points of view and particular positions, particular policies. And there will be stakeholders, people who have a stake in the issues, whose lives will be affected by the policy decisions that you're talking about. So it's important to think about those different kinds of witnesses that you'll be hearing and just to reflect on what can you expect from them? What kinds of evidence will they be giving? What might you need to be careful of when listening to those different kinds of speaker as well? Moving on then to my second topic, thinking about what speakers are saying. So I'm going to give you Alan's 4 top tips for the things that I think you should be asking yourself when listening to speakers. First, most simply, what are the speakers' key points? What are they trying to say? So sometimes that's really clear. Other times you need to do a bit of work yourself in order to work it out. Second, are they backing up their claims with good evidence and arguments? So all of the speakers will be making claims about what's happening in the world or about what the effects of different policies would be. And it's really important to consider, are they actually backing that up with evidence? Are they really convincing you? Are they giving you the material that you need in order to come to a considered judgment? Third, why might someone take a different view? So think while you're listening to the speakers about, well, what might the counter arguments be? What might the other perspectives be on this? And just consider that and think about what questions you might want to put to the speakers during the Q&A. And then finally, thinking across the various different speakers, often they'll disagree with each other. And then it's really good to think, well, why are they disagreeing? Are they disagreeing because they're thinking about the problem in slightly different ways, or they're looking at different kinds of evidence, or they're interpreting the evidence in different ways? Just understanding those differences among the speakers and why they differ from each other is really useful for you in helping to work out what you conclude on the basis of the various different things that you hear. And then the third thing that I want to talk about is thinking about how we ourselves listen. So I guess the ideal in a citizens' assembly is that we're giving everyone a fair hearing. We're listening to everyone equally. But we know that we're all human beings, and it's just really difficult for human beings to do that. We all tend, in fact, to listen to different people in different ways and listen more effectively to some people than to others. And that's because we have what we often refer to as biases in how we listen. So it's just really important to be aware of those different biases that we have. And I'll highlight just a few. So one is we're better at listening to people who present well. So if someone who's presenting is really engaging and they're funny, then it's really easy to listen to them, really easy to kind of get involved. But actually, it could be that the speakers who are a bit more tentative, a bit less flashy, they might have important things to say as well. So it's important to try to get beyond the presentation to hear what they're saying. We're better at listening to people who we think are like us. So there's lots of evidence that, for example, men are a bit better at listening to men, women are a bit better at listening to women. We tend to be best at listening to people who are the same kind of age as us or have similar accents to us. All these kinds of things make a difference to how we listen. And again, if we're trying to focus in on what people are actually saying, then it's good to try to get beyond those initial impressions. We're better at hearing things that fit with what we already think. So this is really, really important. So I'm guilty of this. You're guilty of this. We're all guilty of this. We all tend to find that it's really easy if we agree with something to say, yeah, that's what I think. That's good. Whereas if something doesn't fit with what we already think, then we're inclined to go, oh no, that can't be right. That I don't agree with that. Again, that's not giving everyone a fair hearing. That's not keeping an open mind. And in a citizens' assembly, we really do want to have an open mind and do want to be kind of led by all the evidence that we're listening to. So again, it's good to try to move beyond that if we can. Individual stories move us more than evidence about lots of nameless people. So individual stories about particular people, we can relate to them, we can sympathize, it makes sense to us, we can feel it, and it's easy to remember. Whereas the evidence about the general patterns across the population, that can be a bit harder to get into. It can be drier. But again, that evidence, the general evidence, can be really important. I'm not saying the individual stories are not important, but just trying to get the balance right between those different kinds of evidence is really good. We're worried about being liked. So this is a bit different from the others. This is more about when we're having conversations in the group about the evidence that we've heard. And it can be easy to hear people in the group saying things, various different people, if they agree with each other, you might think, oh, maybe I should just go along with that as well, because I want to fit in. I don't want to feel like I'm sticking out. But actually, Citizens Assembly is all about bringing together people with really different perspectives, different views, different life experiences. And it's absolutely fine if you have a slightly different view or a very different view from other people in the group. So it's really important not to be shy and to be willing to say what you think. That's what you're here for, to say what you think on these issues. And then finally, we're better at remembering the arguments that we heard last. So I want you to do a little experiment on yourself at the end of the session, the end of this afternoon. Just think back to this presentation. So he was talking about those various different biases. Which of them can I actually remember? And I bet for a lot of you, the one that you'll remember first is that you remember the argument that you heard last, just because you heard it last. It's easy to remember. So do just remember, if you hear a range of different speakers talking, it's very tempting just to focus on the last one, because that's the one that's easiest to remember. But try to go back to the earlier speakers as well and reflect on what they said too. They're equally important. Okay, that's all from me. Over to you now. So thank you for listening, and I wish you all the very best for the work of the Citizens Assembly.